Elevating the human experience.
One podcast at a time. I am Emmanuel.
And I'm Lola, and this
is the LHC Pod.
Today is, it's something a little bit interesting. I think that, all our topics are interesting, right? But this one is more, should I say it's more personal? It's more biology based. So we're talking hormones today.
Okay. What we have necessitated this particular one?
Right. I'm sure you'll be wondering hormones. So, it's generally attributed to the feminine gender that hormonal changes usually bring about some certain mood or behavioral changes, which are not necessarily seen as positive changes. So let's break that down. Let's talk about it. And the main discussion for that is the fact that these changes do occur and these changes can affect behavior, but there are two sides to it. The first side is, do these changes actually mean that there's a certain kind of behavior that needs to be experienced? And I'm being particular now about intimate partners, those who have intimate partners, because this is where when you see the discussions on social media, you find out that it's intimate partners to women that are always talking about how these changes in mood and behavior affect them. You don't really see this coming from other sections.
Well, okay, but why is it that it is basically this mood changes as a result of hormones are only directed to the spouses, the boyfriends, and not family members?
Because intimate partners are they are the first line of attack, if I can use that word.
Why so? Because again, for me I think that yes, whilst I understand this and then I acknowledge that there are hormonal changes or reactions that could cause people to act in certain ways. But I think that over time, people have sort of, they are hiding bad behavior, bad character, under the guise of hormonal changes and stuff like that. And I find that very, very annoying because, again, if it is hormonal change, right?
Really?
Yes. Because you cannot, if you have... one thing to solving an issue is acknowledging that you have this issue.
Emmanuel, is there an issue in the first place, though? That's really the question we need to ask now. Is there an issue?
For instance, let me learn. For instance, if you have a bad character...
Whoa.
First of all, acknowledge that you do have certain character that needs to be worked on, and not for everything. And then when issues like this are brought up and people bring and say, "Oh, this is how you've acted," you're like, "Oh, sorry, it's because of my hormonal,"
Okay, I'm trying to connect the dots, and this argument sounds like the kind of argument that I would hear in certain circles. And the circles I'm talking about.
Well, what kind of circles is that? Okay,
the circles that have to do more with a certain gender. But since I'm not trying to start a war here, I'll focus on the main issue itself. You talked about bad character, you talked about hormones, and you also talked about the fact that some bad character is connected to, this hormonal, or rather, hormones are used as an excuse for this. But guess what? It's not an excuse. And I can quote medical science on this.
Okay.
I can quote medical science.
Let's hear it.
So, while I'm not going to quote any studies verbatim, I'm going to say that generally in the study of these changes, especially in biology and intertwined with psychology, you'll find out that there are connections between the changes that occur in hormones, especially during the female cycle. There are connections between that and mood. So it is the mood that generally leads to what is known as maybe the acting out or this kind of patterns of behavior that make spouses and partners feel that, the ladies are not behaving nicely during that point. I'm just trying to bring out the fact that studies have been done.
Okay, so I'd like to ask, sorry for interjecting. Yes. Why is it that it is usually the hormones or the hormonal changes only bring out the negative aspect of that person and not the positive? So how does it work? Maybe
What positive are you expecting though? The lady is in pain. She's having cramps. What positives are you expecting?
So why not? why is it that we cannot channel these pains into positive while quarrelsomeness? Why conflicts? Why arguments?
Look at it this
right?
way. It's kind of like cravings during pregnancy. They are
right. So why can't we have the positive side? Why can't you say, okay, I'm having hormonal changes and that leads me to positive. Maybe I'm not a scientist or I'm not
Neither
a medical
am I, but
doctor. But why always negative? Why always the negative thing? And why is it that the spouses are always and usually, or friends are usually at the receiving end of this whole thing?
So saying
because again, because
when
this happens in most cases, if you find yourself in the midst of friends, chances are that you're likely going to say, okay, are you okay? Maybe you're sleeping. You likely going to be avoiding friends in order not to come into conflict and all of that. But when it has to do with maybe a relationship like boyfriend and spouses, it is not avoidance or not wanting to have an argument or conflict. It is the confrontation. So you bring it up front. And you know, and the guys sometimes feel like, oh, okay, I think I need to step aside. So why is it that on the one side,
the real question is why not?
Why is it that on the one side, when you're dealing with family members, you are able to manage and control yourself, but when you come across maybe your spouse, which is the opposite gender, or your boyfriend, you kind of let everything out?
There is a reason for that.
Okay,
there's really a very solid reason for that. Why? Because guess what? Your spouse, your intimate partner is
okay,
right? Yeah. Your spouse, your intimate partner is basically the first port of call in your life in many ways, right? And because that person is the first port of call in your life, they are the ones who are the recipients of you at your most vulnerable. Let's just look at these as vulnerable moments, right? You may say, oh, she's trying to pick a quarrel, she's trying to be difficult and all that, but it's not really that. It's just someone, guess what? This thing can be expression for a need, you know, a specific need that is not being explicitly stated. This is one of the communication things in relationships where our gender is often accused of not saying what we really want. And guess what? The way we operate most times, and I'm speaking in general terms. Of course, there are people who may not necessarily buy into this, but generally the way we operate is we would appreciate our partners keying into some things without us necessarily saying them.
Like what?
Yes, and this can be an example.
Okay.
So it might look outwardly like, oh, she's picking a quarrel, but meanwhile she might just be expressing a need for comfort or for some reassurance, you know. A lot of times that time of the cycle is very painful and it's stressful and there's a lot going on. Maybe she's at work and she's going through a lot of stress and everything, so she comes back. She's not picking a quarrel just to pick a quarrel. There could be an underlying, and I'm saying there could be, because with these things there's nothing absolute, but there could be an underlying reason for these things. Okay.
Yes, I agree, right? So there are underlying issues around this. But again, I would say this, that we've had women who have serious, severe cramps, hormonal change and all. Okay. And still, yeah, they are able to control themselves. And you would never see them have any issues or altercation whatsoever with their spouses.
I'm happy for them, but guess what? For the rest who don't, they need support.
There are women who also undergo hormonal changes, right? And when you come across them, you would hardly notice some of these things because they are calm, they are cool. They also undergo pains, right? Okay. Cramps and what have you.
I hear you, but
however, just hold on. And at the end of the day, there is nothing. So if you have women who hide under, I am reacting the way I'm reacting because of the hormonal changes that I'm currently undergoing. I think that is something inherently wrong with them.
No.
And
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay.
It's not a template.
Okay.
It's not a template. You see, the way we have different experiences during the cycle, the monthly and everything, it's also the same way we have differences when it comes to how we express ourselves. Just the same way we say some people are extroverted, others are introverted. It doesn't mean that there is one personality that is superior or inferior to the other. Similarly, it does not mean that those who tend to express themselves more outwardly during these hormonal changes are necessarily worse than those who do not. It's a temperament thing.
Okay.
So let's not look at it as if, these guys are doing it. Why are these other ones not
so
doing
you
it?
just mentioned temperament thing.
Yes, I did mention temperament.
Right?
Yes.
So would you say that it is the personality trait?
It's not personality. I think this is
So
more biological.
as against the hormonal changes.
I think it's more it's not personality based. It's more hormonal. When I say hormonal, let me make it more scientific. It's more biological in this instance.
Yeah. So
there is no link between
biological
these changes
can also
and
mean
your
that the
mood.
personality trait is a contributing factor.
Not necessarily. You know why?
Yeah, because how are the other persons able to manage these without rancor?
Okay, good.
Within their space?
Because we are trying to conflate personality and biology. They are two different things. You might say, because you are a calm person.
They work in tandem.
You might say,
there is a
because you're a calm
relationship.
person.
There's
But
a
guess what?
relationship.
Have you seen?
And my point is that your character
seen-
then influences the way you behave.
No, that's a straight,
As against
jacketed way of looking at it.
as against just pinpointing it as hormone.
That's a straight jacketed way of looking at it. You know why I said
Why?
that? Because at the end of the day, when you have one person who is calm, the person might have these hormonal changes and then still act out. So that is nothing to do with their personality. It's a function of the way they are feeling at that time. So you are trying to say, this expression is based on whether a person is a certain way or not. And I'm saying it's not necessarily the case. What has been proven to be linked is the fact that these changes do cause changes, or the hormonal shifts cause changes in mood. That has been established. There are chemicals, there are things in the body that have alterations and all these things. Really doesn't have much to do with personality. Yeah.
No, but for me, I don't think so, because again, I think that there are other factors, if you ask me.
Other factors?
Yes.
Like what?
First of all, upbringing. Your environment can contribute to all of that. Your upbringing, your environment, whether you are stressed or not.
Well,
okay, all of these can contribute. Yes, it does. Because
those things affect personality that you are talking about.
Hold on.
Yes.
So we have this. Okay, so yes, you are undergoing hormonal changes, and that is causing some mild or severe pains, as it were, and stuff like that. But again, the environment that you are in, or your upbringing, there are some persons that are uncomfortable in certain ways, not in the best frame of mind, and they will not lash out. Okay, they are able to control themselves, and this can be that upbringing again has taught them to be able to manage themselves irrespective of the situation that they find themselves. That is one. Two, it could also be that you are in this space. Hold on. Okay. It could also be that you are within the cycle hormonal change era, right? And you're stressed, you're fatigued.
Of course.
Okay,
yes.
Right? So that could cause you to either react in certain ways and all of that. It is not entirely. So each month does not come with the same kind of, and which is the point I'm trying to establish here. Because there are certain periods that you can be undergoing, even with the severe pains, right? And changes, you will still remain calm. Calm in the sense that maybe you are well relaxed, you've slept enough, there is no pressure from anywhere, and so so the chances are that you will not be reacting in a certain way. You understand? But in certain moments or times, you are likely going to react. So I cannot entirely say, even if hormones and all of that contribute to having reactions in certain ways and all of that. It is not entirely. It is the environmental, the external factors. External factors.
That is a simplistic explanation.
External factors can also be a contributing factor as to how you react at the end of the day.
It's a simplistic explanation. You know why it's simplistic? Because it's saying, okay, because of A, then B, C, D. But I'm telling you that's not necessarily the case. It's not necessarily the case. Because you hear situations where people will tell you, oh, I was a certain way before this, and then all of a sudden I've changed. A common example is what happens, like the changes that happen during pregnancy. Those are also hormone-induced as well. Somebody will tell you they didn't like eating a certain kind of food, and suddenly during pregnancy they want that food. Right. So the point is that it's not a consistent pattern throughout life. These things change. And because you have these changes, you also have shifts. And it is those shifts that look upsetting because maybe they are seen as out of character, or they are seen as things that, oh, this person didn't do this before, this person wasn't always moody, and all of a sudden you're getting moody. Why? So it's really more a reaction to that change, and which is why we're saying that don't look at it like it's a set of factors that don't change, or a set of factors that shift from one thing to the other. Look at it as things that influence each other, and they can change at any point in time, especially because of the cycle. So which is why I started my argument with the fact that it has been established that there is a link between hormones and mood. There is a link.
But do you also agree that some persons are hiding other hormonal change, hiding their bad character and personality?
Now that is very strong to say bad character, but don't you think bad character would exhibit itself with or without hormonal changes?
So why?
So why is it then being attributed to just this point in time? You get my drift. Why is
I don't.
You don't. No, of course you won't.
On this note, I would say a big thank you to you for staying tuned till the end of this podcast.
Yay.
If you haven't subscribed yet, please just subscribe. Use the subscribe button, and we have more in stock in store for you. We have more in store for you, and we look forward to having you on the next edition or next episode of the podcast.
All right.
So the LFC pod, okay? Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.